Chapter 1. The Ghost in the Garden. The ghost had a name, Damien Sterling. For 10 years, he was a whisper in the quiet moments, a shadow that fell across our lives when the sun was at its brightest. I, Julian Croft, an architect who built futures from concrete and steel, had spent a decade trying to build a home on the emotional fault line of my wife's past. Eleanora Vance was a creature of stunning contradictions. She moved with the grace of a dancer. Her laughter, when it came, was like wind chimes, and she possessed an intellect that could dissect a financial report or a piece of classic literature with equal surgical precision. When I met her, I was mesmerized. I saw the poise, the beauty, the sharp mind, and I mistook it for depth. I believed that beneath the cool, polished marble of her exterior, there was a warmth I could eventually unearth. For a time, I thought I had. Our first 2 years were placid. We built a life in the leafy, manicured suburb of Willow Creek. I designed our house myself, a modern structure of glass and cedar, with wide windows that drank in the light. I imagined it filled with the noise and clutter of a family, of a shared life. Eleonora seemed content enough. She curated the home with impeccable taste, hosted elegant dinner parties where my business partners were charmed by her wit and played the part of the perfect wife. We were, to the outside world, a portrait of success, but the ghost was always there. He lived in a small leather-bound photo album she kept in her bedside table, one I was never meant to see. He lived in the way she'd sometimes trail off mid-sentence, her gaze lost to a memory that didn't include me. "Damien and I used to come to this lake," she'd say, a soft, wistful smile touching her lips as we'd walk by Willow Creek's small reservoir. He dared me to swim across it in October once. It was freezing, utterly foolish. I almost did it. She never told the story with regret, but with a strange, shimmering pride, as if the memory itself was a jewel she'd take out and polish. Damien was her high school sweetheart, the fiery, artistic boy who was destined for greatness but flamed out somewhere in his early 20s. They were the golden couple, the ones everyone assumed would marry. But his family moved away, he drifted, and Eleonora, pragmatic and unnerved by his lack of direction, had chosen a different path. She chose me. I used to believe that was a victory. I was the stable ground to his shifting sands. I was the one who could provide, who could build, who was present. I was a fool. I see that now. I wasn't the choice. I was the compromise. The first crack in my carefully constructed reality appeared the day she told me she was pregnant with Lily. I was ecstatic. I remember lifting her up in the living room, spinning her around as the afternoon sun streamed through the windows I had designed. I envisioned a new chapter, a final sealing of our family unit that would banish the ghost for good. Eleonora's reaction was muted. There was no joy in her eyes, only a quiet, unnerving sense of resignation. "Well," she said, smoothing down her silk blouse after I set her down, "I suppose it was bound to happen." That night, she moved her things into the guest bedroom at the end of the hall. "I need my space," she'd explained, her voice devoid of emotion. "I won't sleep well, and I don't want to disturb you." The excuse was so thin it was transparent, but I accepted it. I told myself it was about the pregnancy, about hormones, about a temporary need for solitude. The temporary state lasted 5 years. The door to her room and to her heart remained closed. When our daughter Lily was born, I fell in love instantly and completely. She was a perfect, tiny creature with my dark hair and Eleonora's startlingly blue eyes. I held her against my chest and felt a sense of purpose so profound it was seismic. This, I thought, this is what matters. Eleonora's reaction was terrifyingly blank. In the hospital, she held Lily only when the nurses insisted, her arms stiff, her gaze distant. She refused to breastfeed. When we brought our daughter home, to the house I built for our family, Eleonora treated her like a guest, a fragile, noisy, inconvenient guest. She never held her, never cooed at her, and instructed me in a tone that brooked no argument that Lily was not to call her mommy. "She can call me Eleonora," she stated, as if discussing a business arrangement. "It's more respectful. Mommy is cloying." My heart fractured. For Lily's sake, I tried to bridge the chasm. I'd bring the baby to her, hoping the scent of her own child, the feel of her tiny fingers would spark something. "Eleonora, look, she's smiling," I'd plead. She would glance over from her book or her laptop, offer a thin, bloodless smile, and turn away. "That's nice, Julian. Make sure her diaper is clean." The ghost grew stronger then. I began to understand. Lily was my child. She was a Croft. She was the living, breathing symbol of Eleonora's compromise, the anchor holding her to a life she hadn't truly wanted. Damien, I was certain, would have given her wild, tempestuous children with paint-stained fingers and loud, unrestrained laughter. I had given her Lily, a quiet, observant child who learned early on that her mother was a beautiful, cold planet she could only orbit from a safe distance. I became both father and mother. I did the night feedings, the diaper changes, the doctor's visits, the lullabies. I was the one who kissed scraped knees, who built magnificent pillow forts in the living room, and who answered the endless, wonderful why questions of a growing child. All the while, Eleonora observed from her separate room, her separate life, an ethereal and remote presence in our home. She provided financially, her family's wealth was considerable, and she managed her investments with a killer instinct, but she offered nothing else. Our arrangement was that of a business partnership. I managed the domestic sphere, she ensured our financial security. The currency of love was never on the table. Then, 2 months ago, the ghost decided to materialize. It happened on a Tuesday. I was in the kitchen making Lily an after-school snack when Eleonora walked in, her phone pressed to her ear. This was unusual in itself. She rarely took calls in the common areas of the house, but it was the look on her face that made me freeze. A light had been switched on behind her eyes, a vibrant, blazing incandescence I hadn't seen since the first year we were dating. Her cheeks were flushed, and her lips were parted in a genuine, unguarded smile. "I can't believe it," she was saying, her voice giddy, girlish. "After all this time, Willow Creek, of all places." She laughed, that rare wind chime laugh, and it was so full of life that it hurt me. It was a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in years. She saw me watching, and for a second her expression faltered. But the glow was too powerful to be contained. "You will not believe this, Julian," she said after she hung up, her voice trembling with an energy that was entirely foreign. "That was Damien. Damien Sterling. He's moving back. He's got a son. His wife passed away a few years ago. He's taking a job here, looking for a fresh start." She said his name as if it were an incantation. Damien. The world tilted on its axis. The ghost was no longer a whisper. He was a man, with a child, and he was coming here, coming to disrupt the fragile, painful peace I had so carefully constructed. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and I saw a stranger. The placid, cool woman I had lived with for a decade was gone. In her place was a teenage girl, alive with a tremulous, reckless hope. I knew, in that single, gut-wrenching moment, that my marriage, the hollow structure I had been trying to reinforce for years, was about to be leveled to the ground. The ghost was coming home, and I was just the groundskeeper, living in a house that had never truly been mine. Chapter 2. The Thaw and the Frost. Before Damien Sterling's return was anything more than a phone call. Our life was a study in cold, predictable patterns. My world was small and centered, its orbit defined by Lily. Eleonora's was a parallel universe, existing under the same roof, but operating on entirely different laws of physics. Her cruelty wasn't loud or violent. It was the quiet, persistent chill of neglect, a frost that crept into every corner of our home and settled deep in my bones. I remember Lily's 3rd birthday with a clarity that still feels like a shard of glass in my heart. I had invited a few toddlers from her playgroup. The house was filled with tiny shrieks of joy and the scent of the vanilla cake I had baked. Lily, wearing a paper crown I'd made for her, was beaming. Eleonora had promised, a rare and therefore precious promise, to make an appearance. She descended the stairs an hour into the party, dressed not for a child's birthday but for a board meeting, in a severe charcoal gray dress. She stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her expression one of pained tolerance. The other mothers fell into a stilted silence. Lily, unaware of the sudden tension, saw her and her face lit up with pure, unadulterated hope. "Eleonora!" she cried out, using the formal name she'd been taught, but her voice was filled with the longing for a different word. She toddled towards her, her small hands smudged with frosting, and reached up. One of Lily's little friends, a boy named Sam, tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Why does Lily call her mom Eleonora?" he asked in the brutally loud whisper of a 3-year-old. The color drained from Eleonora's face. She looked down at Lily's outstretched, sticky hands as if they were contaminated. Without a word, she turned on her heel and walked back up the stairs. The lock on her bedroom door clicked shut with an air of finality. I spent the rest of the party trying to distract a confused and heartbroken little girl who kept asking why Eleonora had left. The incidents were legion, small cuts that accumulated into 1,000 wounds. There was the time Lily, just 2, had been looking at a shelf of Eleonora's antique books. She hadn't damaged them, merely smudged a leather cover with her baby fingers. As punishment, Eleonora decreed she would have no dinner. I watched, helpless and enraged, as she sat coldly at the dining table, ignoring the whimpers of our hungry child. I ended up sneaking a bottle and some mashed bananas into Lily's room later that night, feeling like a criminal in my own home. My daughter's silent, grateful tears in the dark were a testament to the dysfunction we lived in. This was our normal. A life of carefully managed distance, of tiptoeing around the vast, empty spaces in our family. I was the sun, the moon, and the stars in Lily's sky. Eleonora was a distant, cold nebula, beautiful to look at, but offering no light, no warmth. I had accepted it for Lily's sake. I had reasoned that a physically present but emotionally absent mother was better than the alternative. Then came the phone call. Then came the thaw. The change in Eleonora after she learned of Damien's return was nothing short of a resurrection. The frost that had encased her for years began to melt, but the warmth was not for me or for Lily. It was for him. It started with small things. She began to hum. A woman who had moved through our house in monastic silence for years now filled the hallways with snatches of old songs I'd never heard her sing. She spent hours in front of her mirror, not with the efficient, business-like routine I was used to, but with the focused, hopeful artistry of a woman preparing for a lover. New dresses appeared in her closet, soft, flowing fabrics in vibrant colors that were a stark contrast to her usual palette of gray, black, and beige. Her phone, once a tool for stock alerts and business emails, became an extension of her hand. She'd smile at texts, her face illuminated by the screen's glow in a way it never was by the morning sun. She took long, rambling walks in the evenings, her voice a low, happy murmur as she spoke to someone I knew, instinctively, was Damien. The most jarring change was her sudden, clumsy attempts at motherhood. It was as if she had read a manual on the subject and was now trying to apply its lessons, but without any understanding of the subject matter. One afternoon, she came into the living room where Lily and I were building a castle out of blocks. She was holding a brand new, ridiculously expensive-looking doll. "For you," she said, holding it out to Lily. Her smile was stiff, rehearsed. Lily looked from the doll to me, her eyes wide with confusion. She had never received a spontaneous gift from her mother. She took it hesitantly, her small hands stroking its synthetic hair. "Say thank you to Eleonora," I prompted gently. "Thank you," Lily whispered, her eyes still on me, seeking reassurance. Eleonora's smile widened, a look of self-satisfaction on her face. "See? We can be a happy family." She turned and left as abruptly as she had arrived, leaving the doll and Lily in her wake. Lily played with it for 5 minutes before returning to our block castle. The doll was a beautiful, empty object, just like the gesture itself. It was an offering not to her daughter, but to the idea of herself as a good mother, an image she was clearly polishing in anticipation of Damien's arrival. The house began to feel different. It was charged with her energy, her anticipation. It was like living inside a bell jar with a butterfly that had just emerged from its chrysalis. She was vibrant and alive, but she was beating her wings against the glass, desperate to get out, to get to him. The day he finally arrived in Willow Creek, she was almost vibrating with excitement. She announced she was going out to help an old friend get settled. She was gone for hours. She came back late, her cheeks flushed with wine and laughter, smelling faintly of a man's cologne that wasn't mine. She found me in Lily's room, reading a bedtime story. She stood in the doorway, a vision in a new emerald green dress, and for the first time, she looked at her daughter with something approaching interest. "He has a son, you know," she said, her voice soft. "Leo, he's 6, a lovely boy, very bright. Lily should meet him." My blood ran cold. It wasn't about Lily making a new friend. It was about her daughter being used as a prop, a bridge to facilitate the joining of Eleonora's fantasy life with her real one. Lily, half asleep, stirred. "Mommy?" she murmured, the forbidden word slipping out in her drowsy state. For the first time in 5 years, Eleonora didn't flinch. She didn't correct her. A strange, calculating look crossed her face. She stepped into the room, perched on the edge of the bed, and stroked Lily's hair with an unpracticed, hesitant touch. "Yes, darling," she whispered, her voice like honey. "Mommy's here." I watched this performance, and a feeling of profound dread washed over me. The years of cold frost had been painful, but I had learned how to navigate them. This sudden artificial thaw was infinitely more dangerous. It was a warmth generated by a false sun, and I knew with absolute certainty that when it vanished, the ensuing frost would be deadly. She wasn't becoming a mother. She was simply rehearsing for an audience of one, and his name was Damien Sterling. Chapter 3: The Rising Tide. Life with the new Eleonora was a dizzying, disorienting affair. Our home, once a quiet sanctuary of predictable chill, became a stage for her ongoing performance of reclaimed motherhood. Damien and his son Leo were now constant fixtures, their presence an invasive species in the carefully tended garden of my life with Lily. Eleonora orchestrated playdates, dinners, and weekend outings with a feverish intensity, all under the guise of blending their worlds. It was a transparent farce. She was auditioning for the role of Damien's partner, and Lily and I were unwilling members of the supporting cast. My attempts to salvage what was left of our family were met with a smiling, unyielding wall of dismissal. I tried to initiate our own family activities, just the three of us. "Lily made something for you," I said one evening, nudging my daughter forward. Lily shyly held out a piece of pink construction paper, folded and decorated with crayon hearts. It was one of her mommy's promise coupons. This one read, "One family movie night with popcorn. Just us." Eleonora took it, her eyes scanning the childish scrawl. "Oh, how sweet," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. She patted Lily's head. "That's a lovely idea, darling, but we can't tonight. Damien is having trouble with his new rental's plumbing, and I promised I'd go over and help him sort it out. Leo will be there. Why don't you two come along? It'll be an adventure." The casual way she offered to trade our daughter's heartfelt wish for a chance to play house with her old flame was like a punch to the gut. "No, Eleonora," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "Lily wants to have a movie night with her parents. Here." Her smile tightened. "Don't be so provincial, Julian. Friends help friends. It's a good lesson for Lily. Besides, Damien needs me. Needs me." The words hung in the air, a declaration of allegiance. She tucked the coupon into her purse, where I knew it would be forgotten, and left. Lily and I watched a movie alone that night, the silence in the room punctuated by my daughter's quiet, confused questions about why Mommy was always with Mr. Sterling. The flash flood happened on a Saturday in late September. The town was holding its annual Founders' Day picnic in the park that bordered Willow Creek. It was a perfect autumn day, the air crisp and the leaves a riot of gold and crimson. Lily was ecstatic. She loved the pony rides and the cotton candy. Eleonora had insisted that Damien and Leo join us, of course. "It's a community event. We should all go as one big happy group," she'd chirped, ignoring the grim set of my jaw. The five of us were a picture of modern dysfunction. I pushed Lily on the swings while Eleonora hovered near Damien, her laughter loud and frequent, her hand often finding a reason to touch his arm. Leo, a boisterous and demanding 6-year-old, followed his father around, while Lily watched the woman she was now tentatively calling Mommy devote all her attention to another child. The change in weather was terrifyingly abrupt. The sky, blue and cloudless moments before, turned a bruised, angry purple. A wind whipped through the park, tearing leaves from the trees. Then the rain began, not a drizzle, but a torrential, blinding downpour. People screamed, grabbing children and abandoning picnic baskets as they ran for their cars. The ground turned to mud in seconds. Willow Creek, normally a gentle, meandering stream, began to swell with terrifying speed. I grabbed Lily's hand, shouting Eleonora's name over the roar of the rain and the rising water. She was near the edge of the creek with Damien, where Leo had been trying to float a toy boat. The water was already surging over the banks, a churning brown torrent. In the chaos, both Lily and Leo lost their footing on the slick, muddy grass and tumbled towards the rushing water. They were only a few feet apart. Lily, smaller and lighter, was struggling to get up, her face a mask of terror. Leo had fallen closer to the churning edge, crying out in fear. "Eleonora!" I screamed, my heart seizing in my chest. She stood frozen for a single, horrifying second, her head whipping between the two children. Her own daughter, my daughter, was crying for her. The son of her past love was also in peril. There was no hesitation. Like a heat-seeking missile locked on its target, she lunged. But she didn't lunge for Lily. She scrambled past our daughter, her eyes fixed only on Leo. She scooped him up in her arms, pressing his face into her shoulder and murmuring reassurances as she stumbled back towards the relative safety of a large oak tree where Damien was standing. She ran right past our daughter. The world went silent. All I could hear was the frantic beating of my own heart. I saw the look on Lily's face, not just fear of the water, but a dawning, soul-crushing wave of comprehension. She had seen it. She knew. Her mother had chosen another child. I reached her in 2 strides, pulling her up out of the mud and into my arms, holding her so tightly she grunted. I didn't care. I needed to feel her, solid and safe against my chest. I turned my back on Eleonora and the Sterlings and carried my daughter away from the flood, both the one in the creek and the one that had just washed away the last vestiges of my hope. Later that evening, after we were home, dry and safe, Eleonora tried to explain. She came into the living room, where I was holding a silent, hollow-eyed Lily. "It was just instinct, Julian," she began, her voice shaky. "Leo was closer to the edge. It was a pragmatic choice, nothing more." I looked at her, at this woman who could rationalize the abandonment of her child as an act of pragmatism, and I felt nothing. The love, the anger, the frustration, it had all been washed away, leaving behind a vast, cold emptiness. "He wasn't closer," I said, my voice flat and dead. "I saw it all. You chose him." "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her defensiveness flaring. "Lily is fine. You were right there. Nothing happened." "Something did happen, Eleonora," I replied, stroking Lily's hair as she burrowed deeper into my side. "You just don't have the capacity to see it." She left the room, frustrated by my refusal to accept her sanitized version of events. A few minutes later, Lily stirred in my arms. She looked up at me, her blue eyes, her mother's eyes, swimming with a sorrow too deep for a 5-year-old. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't think my promise coupons work anymore." I held her tighter, the truth of her words a final, devastating blow. They didn't work. They never had. We were just 2 people clinging to a raft in a storm, while the person who was supposed to be our anchor was busy saving someone else from the rain. Chapter 4. The Architect of an Escape. The flood washed away more than just the park grounds. It eroded the very foundation of my denial. For years I had been a restorer, patiently trying to patch the cracks in our marriage, reinforcing the crumbling facade for Lily's sake. But after watching Eleonora run past our daughter, I was done with restoration. It was time for demolition, a controlled, quiet demolition that would leave my daughter and me standing, free from the wreckage. My new project was not a house of glass and cedar, but an escape. I was now the architect of my own departure. The day after the flood, I called a divorce lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, whose discretion was as legendary as his hourly rate. I met him in a sterile, anonymous coffee shop in the next town over. "She chose her lover's child over ours during an emergency," I stated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. That was the end. Marcus, a man who had seen the ugliest face of human relationships, didn't even flinch. He simply nodded, his pen scratching across a legal pad. "Assets, custody, timeline. Let's be strategic, Mr. Croft." While Marcus began drawing up the legal framework, I started building the practical one. I opened a new bank account in my name only. I began methodically liquidating some of the joint assets I was entitled to, moving the funds into my secure account. I researched coastal towns 3 states away, places with good schools and a quiet way of life. I found a small city called Port Blossom that felt right. It smelled of salt and new beginnings. I spent my evenings, after Lily was asleep, scrolling through real estate listings for small, unassuming rental houses. Lily, in her own intuitive way, began to prepare as well. She stopped trying. The mommy's promise coupons disappeared. She no longer asked why Eleonora was leaving or where she was going. When her mother entered a room, Lily's bright chatter would dim to a polite, reserved silence. She became my shadow, her small hand always seeking mine, her presence a constant, silent plea for reassurance. Her trust in her mother was broken, and she had transferred all of it in a single, weighty bundle to me. The most unnerving part was that Eleonora barely seemed to notice. She was too consumed by the burgeoning drama of her rekindled romance, which, from what I could gather, was not the seamless fantasy she had envisioned. I started to see the fine cracks in her own facade. The giddy, girlish glow she'd had was beginning to fade, replaced by a familiar flicker of irritation. Damien, it turned out, was less a dashing romantic hero and more a man-child with financial problems. Leo was not the lovely, bright boy she had described, but a difficult, tantrum-prone child who was openly hostile to her attempts to mother him. One evening, I overheard a tense phone call she was having in the garden. I was in my home office, the window open to the cool night air. Her voice, sharp and laced with frustration, carried clearly. "What do you mean your credit card was declined, Damien? I gave you money for that just last week. No, I can't just handle it. I have my own finances to manage, because it's complicated, that's why." A long pause. "Don't you dare speak to me in that tone. I am doing everything for you, for Leo, everything." I saw her through the window, pacing back and forth, her silhouette rigid with anger. She hung up and stood for a long moment, staring up at the moon. For the first time in a long time, she looked lost. A few days later, she made a rare attempt to spend time with just me and Lily. She suggested a trip to the zoo, an idea so out of character it was jarring. We went, but the entire time she was distracted, constantly checking her phone. Lily, polite but distant, showed more affection to the sleeping pandas than she did to her mother. As we walked back to the car, Eleonora sighed, a sound of deep, genuine weariness. "It's not the same, is it?" she said, almost to herself. I thought she was talking about us, about our family. "No, it's not." But her gaze was distant. "When Damien and I spend the day with Leo, it's exhausting. He's always whining about something. Damien is always on my case about money or his career. There's no peace." She looked at me, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. "It's quiet with you two." I never realized how comfortable that quiet was. It was the most honest thing she had said to me in years, and it was terrifying. She wasn't missing us. She wasn't realizing her love for me or for her daughter. She was realizing that her fantasy was inconvenient. The life she had scorned, the quiet stability I provided, was starting to look appealing again, but only as a refuge from the tiresome reality of her affair. She was feeling the absence of the comfort I provided, not the presence of the love she had destroyed. That night, I finalized the rental agreement for a small two-bedroom house in Port Blossom. I looked at the signed lease on my computer screen, a digital promise of a new life. On my desk, in a crisp manila envelope, lay the divorce papers Marcus Thorne had couriered over that afternoon. They were ready. All they needed was a signature and a final, decisive act of departure. Eleonora thought she was missing the quiet. She had no idea that the silence was about to become absolute. She was noticing a crack in her fantasy world, but she was oblivious to the fact that her real world, the one she had taken for granted, was about to vanish completely. Chapter 5. The empty house acceptance is a quiet thing. It doesn't arrive with a thunderclap, but with the gentle stillness that follows a storm. For Lily and me, that stillness settled over us in the final week. The pain was still there, a low, constant hum beneath the surface, but the frantic, desperate hope was gone. We had accepted the truth of our situation. Eleonora did not love us, not in the way we needed, not in the way that mattered. And with that acceptance came a strange, liberating peace. We were no longer waiting for a miracle. We were preparing for a journey. I told Lily we were going on a long adventure, a secret mission, just the two of us. Her eyes, which had been so clouded with confusion, lit up with a spark of excitement for the first time in weeks. A secret she could share with me was a world away from the secrets that had excluded her. "Is it to the sea, Daddy?" she asked, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. I had been showing her pictures of Port Blossom, of the gulls and the sandy beaches. "It is," I confirmed, "but we can't take everything, just our most important treasures." And so we packed. While Eleonora was out, increasingly with Damien trying to shore up their fracturing relationship, Lily and I moved through the house like quiet ghosts, gathering the pieces of our life. I packed my clothes, my books, the blueprints of every building I had ever designed. Lily chose her worn-out stuffed bear, a collection of unusually shaped sea stones, and the small stack of her favorite picture books. She paused by the expensive doll Eleonora had given her, picking it up and then placing it carefully back on the shelf. "She can stay here," Lily said, her voice small but firm. "She belongs to this house." Every box I sealed felt like a prayer being answered. I was not just packing our belongings, I was packing away a decade of quiet heartache, of hollow apologies, of being second best. The house, the magnificent structure I had designed with so much hope, now felt like a mausoleum. I was ready to leave it behind. The final act was the most difficult. I sat at the polished mahogany dining table, the divorce papers laid out before me. My signature was steady, a clean, dark line that severed 10 years of my life. I slid one copy into an envelope addressed to Marcus Thorne and left the other in the very center of the table, a stark white rectangle against the dark wood. It was a silent, irrefutable statement. No yelling, no final, dramatic confrontation. Just the cold, hard fact of the end. I took one last look around. I saw the ghost of Lily learning to walk in the hallway, the ghost of me decorating our first Christmas tree. These memories were mine to take. The house and the woman who haunted it could keep the rest. I picked up our 2 suitcases, took Lily's hand, and we walked out the front door without looking back. Eleonora came home just before midnight. The argument with Damien had been the worst yet. He had accused her of being cold, of holding back, of treating him and Leo like a project instead of a family. "It was never like this with Julian, was it?" he'd spat. "He got the calm, easy version of you. I just get the frustrated financier." The words had stung because they were true. She had stormed out, needing to escape the cloying atmosphere of his messy rental and his endless demands. She craved the quiet, the order, the unspoken comfort of the home she shared with Julian. She was beginning to realize, with a dawning horror, that the fantasy of Damien was far more beautiful than the reality. The man himself was a disappointment. She opened the door to her house, expecting the familiar silence that had recently begun to feel less like emptiness and more like peace. But this silence was different. It was heavier, deeper. "Julian," she called out, her voice echoing in the grand foyer. No answer. A prickle of unease ran down her spine. She walked into the living room. The pillow fort Lily and Julian had built last weekend, which she'd complained about, was gone. The entire room was unnervingly tidy. She climbed the stairs, her footsteps loud on the hardwood. She went to Lily's room first. The bed was perfectly made. She opened the closet, empty, except for a few out-of-season dresses and the beautiful expensive doll, sitting alone on a shelf. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. She ran down the hall to the master suite, the one she hadn't slept in for 5 years. She threw open the wardrobe. Julian's suits, his shirts, his shoes, all gone. The top of his dresser was bare, the framed photo of him and a baby Lily that always sat there missing. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stumbled back into the hallway and ran to her own room, her sanctuary. It was untouched. Then she ran to the guest room, the one Julian had occupied. It was as sterile as a hotel room. It was then, as she stood breathless in the silent, empty house, that she saw it, the white envelope on the dining table. Her hands trembled as she walked towards it, a sense of premonition so strong it made her nauseous. She tore it open. Petition for dissolution of marriage, her name, Julian's name, his signature, bold and final at the bottom. She sank into a chair, the papers slipping from her numb fingers. Gone. They were gone. He had actually done it. He had left. He had taken Lily, and he had left. She pulled out her phone, her fingers fumbling as she dialed his number. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. She sent a frantic text. "Julian, where are you? Where is Lily? Call me immediately." No reply. The delivered receipt under her message was a cold, indifferent confirmation that it had been received and ignored. She looked around the vast, silent house. The house she had curated, the life she had kept at arm's length. She had been so consumed by the ghost of a past love that she hadn't realized the real life in front of her was slowly packing its bags. She had chased a fantasy, and in her disillusionment had turned to go home, only to find that home no longer existed. The quiet she had begun to crave had been replaced by an absolute, crushing void. And in that void, the only sound was the echo of her own shattering delusion. Chapter 6. Echoes and Consequences. The year that followed was a masterclass in the art of unraveling. For me, it was a quiet, deliberate process of stitching a new life together in the salt-laced air of Port Blossom. For Eleonora, it was a frantic, public, and humiliating tearing apart at the seams. My first few months in Port Blossom were about establishing a rhythm for Lily. We found our favorite park, our favorite ice cream shop, our favorite spot on the beach to watch the sunset. I enrolled her in a small, friendly kindergarten where her teacher was a warm, gentle woman with kind eyes. That woman was Clara Hayes. It was a coincidence that felt like fate. Clara had been a periphery friend in Willow Creek, someone from our wider social circle. We'd shared a few pleasantries at town events, but I'd never truly known her. Seeing her here in this new place was like finding a familiar landmark in a foreign country. "Julian Croft? What in the world are you doing in Port Blossom?" she'd asked, her face breaking into a wide, genuine smile on Lily's first day of school. Our friendship rekindled easily, naturally. She understood, without me having to explain the sordid details, that I was a father starting over. She was patient and kind with Lily, who quickly grew to adore her. Clara became our first friend, our anchor in this new world. I was hesitant to let it become anything more, the scar tissue around my heart still tender. But her steady, undemanding presence was a balm. Meanwhile, 1,500 miles away, Eleonora was living in a nightmare of her own making. I heard about it in fragments, through relayed messages from our mutual acquaintances before I cut them off, and later through the cold, objective lens of the internet. Her first move was to confront Damien. She stormed into his rental, divorce papers in hand, demanding to know if he had seen me, if he knew where I'd gone. Damien, seeing his meal ticket and convenient domestic partner slipping away, turned on her with vicious cruelty. "Why would I know where your husband is?" He'd apparently sneered. "You're the one who couldn't let him go. You wanted it all, Eleonora, his stability and my excitement. Well, you played your game and you lost. Don't drag me into your mess." He shamed her, called her a fool for throwing away a man like me, and made it clear that without the backing of my perceived stability, she and her complicated finances were of no use to him. Her next call was to her closest friend, Isabel, the one person who had dared to caution her. "You have to help me find him," Eleonora had pleaded, frantic. Isabel's response, as it was relayed to me, was brutal. "Help you? Eleonora, I warned you. I told you that your obsession with Damien was a sickness. I told you that you were treating Julian and that sweet little girl like furniture. You didn't listen. You chose this. Now you get to live in the house you decorated, alone." Desperate and isolated, Eleonora made her most catastrophic mistake. She turned to the public. She posted a long, rambling plea on the Willow Creek Community Facebook page. It was filled with pictures of me and Lily, begging for any information, painting a picture of a distraught mother and wife whose family had vanished. The response was not what she expected. The public shaming was swift and merciless. "Is this the same woman who let her daughter stand outside in the freezing cold on her own birthday?" wrote one neighbor. "I was at the Founders' Day picnic," another commented. "I saw you run right past your own little girl to save your boyfriend's son from a little bit of water. We all saw it. My son was in Lily's playgroup. She never once came to a pickup or a party. She looked right through her own child. Don't play the victim now." The post became a viral spectacle of her failings. Her performance of the grieving wife was shredded by a chorus of witnesses who had seen the cold reality for years. She was mocked, humiliated, and exposed. Within a day, she deleted the post and her account, but the damage was done. She had become a pariah in the town she once ruled. It was almost a full year after I'd left when she finally found us. A private investigator, no doubt, hired with the money she once refused to spend on her family. I was sitting in a cafe with Lily and Clara. It was a Saturday morning. Lily was chattering away, showing Clara a drawing she'd made, and Clara was listening with rapt attention, her head tilted, her smile genuine. We looked, I suppose, like a family. Happy. Whole. Then I saw her, standing across the street, staring through the cafe window. She was gaunt, her expensive clothes hanging off her frail frame. The vibrant, polished woman I had married was gone, replaced by a pale, haunted specter. Our eyes met through the glass. There was no anger in her gaze, only a vast, bottomless despair. My heart didn't leap, it didn't ache, it felt still. I felt the detached pity one might feel for a stranger's misfortune. Clara noticed my expression and followed my gaze. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Julian." Eleonora took a hesitant step forward as if to cross the street. She wanted a confrontation, a scene, a chance to plead her case. I gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I turned my back to the window, leaned towards my daughter, and asked, "So, Lilybug, tell me more about this magical dragon." I did not have to see Eleonora to know what she did. I could feel her retreat. I could feel the final, crushing weight of her consequence settle upon her. She had found us, but she had lost us long ago. The woman across the street was a ghost from a different life, and I was no longer interested in being haunted. Chapter 7. The Last Promise. The aftermath of a storm is not silence, but a new set of sounds. In Port Blossom, it was the cry of gulls, the gentle rhythm of waves on the shore, and most importantly, the sound of Lily's easy, unrestrained laughter. Seeing Eleonora had been a jolt, a ghost at the feast of our new life, but it was not the cataclysm she might have hoped for. It was merely a final, sad echo. She didn't approach us at the cafe that day, but she didn't leave town either. For a week, she became a peripheral presence. I'd see her car parked down the street from our house. I'd catch a glimpse of her watching from a distance as I picked Lily up from school. She was a satellite, trapped in a decaying orbit around a world that no longer recognized her gravitational pull. She never spoke, she just watched, her expression a permanent mask of sorrow. Clara was my rock. "What do you want to do, Julian?" she asked gently one evening as we sat on my porch after Lily was in bed. "You can't live like this with her lurking in the shadows." "I know," I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I don't want a scene. I don't want Lily to be hurt again." "Lily is stronger than you think," Clara said, her voice full of a teacher's quiet wisdom. "And you deserve to close this chapter, for good." The final confrontation came, as I should have known it would, on Lily's terms. A few days later, on the way home from school, Lily spotted her. Eleonora was standing near our house, looking at the small garden of sunflowers I had planted in the front yard. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice quiet but not afraid. "It's Eleonora." The use of her formal name was a statement in itself. She was not Mommy. She was a person her father used to know. I stopped the car. I looked at my daughter. "Do you want to go inside, sweetheart? We can." Lily shook her head. She unbuckled her seatbelt. "I have something for her," she said. She reached into her little unicorn backpack and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of paper. It was one of her old hand-drawn coupons. Together, we walked towards the woman who was my ex-wife and my daughter's biological mother. Eleonora's head snapped up as we approached. Her eyes, red-rimmed and desperate, fixed on me first, then shifted to Lily. "Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking. I know I was wrong. I know. Please, just give me a chance. I'll do anything. I'll change." It was the same plea, the same empty promise, but this time it held no power over me. I looked at her, at the shell of the woman I once loved, and felt a profound sadness for the life she had squandered. "It's too late for chances, Eleonora," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "We've moved on." Tears streamed down her pale cheeks. "But she's my daughter," she choked out, a desperate, possessive claim. Before I could respond, Lily stepped forward. She held out the crumpled coupon. Eleonora stared at it, her expression shifting from desperation to utter confusion. "You still owe me a promise," Lily said, her 5-year-old voice imbued with a lifetime of premature wisdom. Hope, sudden and pathetic, flared in Eleonora's eyes. Yes, anything, darling. Anything you want. Do you want me to come home? Do you want us to be a family again?" Lily shook her head slowly. "No," she said. She pushed the coupon into Eleonora's trembling hand. "I want you to promise to sign the final paper so Daddy won't be sad anymore. and I want you to promise to let us be happy here." The air went out of Eleonora's lungs. It was a physical blow, more powerful than any hateful words I could have ever spoken. Her daughter's final wish was not for her return, but for her complete and final departure. The coupon wasn't a plea for connection. It was a child's negotiated settlement for peace. Eleonora stared at the paper, then at her daughter, then at me. The last vestiges of her fight seemed to drain away, leaving her hollowed out, defeated. She nodded, unable to speak, a single jerky motion of her head. She left the next day. A package arrived by courier a week later. It contained 2 items. The first was the fully signed and executed final divorce settlement. The second was a small velvet-lined box. Inside were 2 sets of documents. They were stock certificates, transferring a significant life-altering portion of the Vance Family Corporation into 2 new trusts. One for me and one for Lily. A note, written in her elegant looping script, was tucked inside. "This is not forgiveness, it is restitution. You were right, Julian. I needed to understand what I had lost. I do now. When Lily is old enough, if she ever wishes it, the rest of it will be hers. She is the only thing of value I ever truly produced." With that, she was gone. The ghost was exorcised. A few months later, on a warm spring evening, I was sitting on the porch with Clara, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. "Daddy, look!" Lily called, her hands cupped around a blinking light. "I have a star!" Clara's hand found mine in the twilight. It felt natural. It felt like home. "She's happy, Julian," Clara said softly. I looked at my daughter, her face illuminated with pure joy, and then at the warm, steady woman beside me. The ache in my chest, the one I had carried for so long I had forgotten what it was like to be without it, was finally gone. "We all are," I said, and for the first time in more than a decade, the words were completely and utterly true.
Epilogue, Eleonora. It has been 5 years since I last saw them. From the sterile quiet of my penthouse apartment, which overlooks a city I do not know and people I do not care about, I have become an expert in ghosts. I see them everywhere. I see the ghost of a little girl with my eyes and Julian's kind heart, offering me a hand-drawn coupon. I see the ghost of a good, patient man, his back turned to me as he carries our daughter away from a flood I created. Success is a cold comfort. My portfolio has tripled. I am lauded in financial circles as a ruthless, brilliant strategist. They use words like visionary and unflinching. They don't know that my vision is permanently fixed on the past, and I am unflinching because I have nothing left to feel. I hollowed myself out chasing a phantom, and this wealth is the gilded, empty shell that remains. I was not in love with Damien Sterling. I see that now with a clarity that is its own special kind of torture. I was in love with the idea of him, with the memory of the girl I was when I was with him, a girl free of responsibility, a girl with a limitless, unwritten future. I spent a decade mourning a life I never had, and in doing so, I murdered the one I did. I remember the day of the flash flood. I remember the split second of choice. My mind screamed Lily, but my body, propelled by a decade of romanticized delusion, moved toward Leo. It was the ultimate betrayal, a physical manifestation of my heart's disordered allegiances. In that moment, I didn't save a child, I damned myself. I thought, thank God Julian is there. He'll get her. I used his competence as an excuse for my own monstrous failure. I took his love for our daughter for granted, so much so that I felt free to abdicate my own. And the cake. The peanut butter chocolate cake. I had forgotten her allergy. How does a mother forget something so elemental, so critical to her child's survival? It is simple. She forgets when she is not a mother. In my mind, I was still the girl trying to win the affection of the handsome boy. Leo was my audience, Damien my judge. My own daughter was a footnote, and my negligence almost cost her everything. The thought of it, even now, brings a coppery taste of shame to my mouth. Julian's new wife, Clara, sends me a Christmas card every year. It's a kind gesture, one I do not deserve. It is always a photograph of the 3 of them. Lily is a young lady now, tall and smiling, her arms slung easily around Clara's shoulders. Julian looks content. The deep, weary lines around his eyes are gone. They look like a family. They are a family. I keep the final, Mommy's Promise, coupon in my safe, alongside the stock certificates and my will. I want you to promise to let us be happy. A child's plea for peace. A daughter's final act of mercy for a mother who showed her none. There are days I think about picking up the phone. But what would I say? I'm sorry. The words are meaningless, an insult to the depth of the wounds I inflicted. There is no apology that can restore a childhood, no penance that can unbreak a heart. I built my life on a foundation of fantasy, and when the rains came, it all washed away. Julian, the architect, built his new life on the solid ground of love and truth. His home will stand forever. Mine is just a beautiful, empty house full of ghosts, and the most terrifying one of all is the ghost of the woman I could have been.